There aren't many games like Tarkov out there. It requires not just a lot out of you, the player, but also the equipment you are running, especially your PC. This game has had its fair share of performance issues over the years, and to be brutally honest, it still does. As the scope of the game has gotten bigger, and BSG's ambitions with the game grew alongside that, so too did the requirements necessary to run the game effectively. The older maps and locations around Tarkov are mostly optimized, but Streets is still the main problem out of all the maps in the game. The sheer size of the map, compounded with the fact that it's already gotten one expansion and there are plans for at least one more, means the map is just so large and filled with items that most PCs are gonna struggle playing it. Even offline raids with no AI scavs spawning in, the map doesn't really perform well, unfortunately. To be very transparent, I am not the most versed in PCs, parts, upgrades, and how to min-max what you currently have to get the most bang for your buck. I don't even know how to overclock, so there isn't going to be a lot of concrete science behind what I say, more so just conjecture on my part and what I've experienced over the years of playing this game. Now here's the reality of the situation. There's only so much modifying your graphics settings will yield in terms of improving how Tarkov as a game runs. Sure, there are a couple of in-game settings and a few outside the game that can certainly help. The only real setting that will drastically either give or take away frames is resampling. However, that comes at the cost of obliterating how your game looks by down or super sampling. To be fair, if your system can support NVIDIA DLSS or AMD FSR, these options can help give back some frames to your game. I don't know exactly how they work, and I'm sure there are some wonderful videos on YouTube about these features and how they work, but from what I understand, these settings downscale the quality of your game and then use algorithms to help fill the gaps where your lower settings might not be able to, thus having your game visually meet somewhere in the middle but perform much better than if you were to run the game natively. But the brutally honest truth is that if you want Streets to run at like 100 frames or higher, you need to spend a lot of money on a very powerful computer, which sucks, and it simply shouldn't be that way because it feels gross to have to spend thousands of dollars on a PC to get a single game working the way that it honestly should after 8 years of development. Even with an NVIDIA GTX 3060, 32 gigs of DDR4 RAM, and an i7-117F processor, the game has its moments where it just doesn't want to cooperate. Compound that with using a monitor that requires me to run VSync at 60Hz to prevent screen tearing, and you have times where Tarkov and some other games just don't want to play nicely. Nevertheless, if you play Tarkov and have moments where it begins to chug, don't worry, it's not just you. Performance issues are not surprising though. Like I said, Tarkov is kind of an unoptimized mess in the grand scheme of things, and it's sadly been this way since day one. I can't recall a time where the game wasn't in a state of feeling disheveled, but to be fair, for all its faults and how poorly it can run sometimes, the game itself, when you do run decent settings, is brutally honest, it's gorgeous. The gun models are absolutely pristine, and just walking around the world is kind of a treat, at least when the weather is cooperating. It's not an ugly game by any stretch, and it's part of the reason why, regardless of how a map will perform, I always have my textures set to high, and this goes for every game I play, not just Tarkov. The last thing I want to see is a sloppy, messy, ugly graphic on my screen for potentially hundreds of hours. Like, I've seen people play Apex with low settings, and it's actually just disgusting. Plus, that ruins the experience for anyone watching because their view of the game is either from a stream or a video, so it looks even worse for them than it does for you. At least you're getting the source video, but for everybody else, if you can, at least run your game on like medium settings. Your viewers will thank you. But yeah, sadly there's no magic formula or array of settings to get 100 more frames in Tarkov with every PC setup. Again, you have some options, but you need to first make sure your rig has parts that are compatible to begin using them, and then play around with either down or super sampling to fit your needs. Or perhaps DLSS/FSR can help bridge that gap so your experience isn't as toxic. In case anyone is curious, here are what my settings are in Tarkov. It's nothing special, and most of the options are just turned off, and my game looks pretty decent. I think my only biggest complaint is the amount of tearing and flickering edges of objects in the world have at a distance, which is fixed by adjusting the anti-aliasing options in the settings, but I've messed with it tons and have found that this current setup to be the lesser of all the demons. At this point, I would probably need better hardware to lower how much I see of this tearing in-game. But if you'd like a video going over specifically Tarkov setting and actually learning what they mean and how they work, I still, years later down the line, refer to Veritas's video going over all of the settings in Tarkov and how much of a direct impact they have on game performance. I'll leave a link in the description if you'd like to watch it for yourself. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Be sure to leave a comment down below about your settings and or experiences messing around with Tarkov settings, and be sure to subscribe for more videos about how this game may or may not ever be truly optimized to a point where most people can run it with little to no issues. I hope to see you in future ones.